Why does he always leave early? Evelyn muttered, watching the janitor through the glass wall. Noah Finch was already folding his gray jacket at 3:02 p.m. Same as every Friday. He didn't rush. He never did. He simply clocked out, nodded at the security guard, and disappeared down the corridor. Evelyn's eyes shifted to the alert on her screen. Prototype core missing from Vault 3. Her stomach clenched. She pressed the intercom, checked the maintenance logs for Finch. Now. Her assistant's voice crackled back. He signed out 20 minutes ago. Of course he did, Evelyn whispered, grabbing her keys. Outside, her sedan merged into the traffic, shadowing the dented blue hatchback ahead. Noah's car rattled like it was held together by stubbornness. He drove past the polished towers and into the forgotten side of the city. Cracked roads, flickering streetlights, silence. Every instinct told her to stop. CEOs didn't tail employees through industrial wastelands, but something about him, that steady calm, that timing, gnawed at her. Then he turned sharply into a fenced lot and parked beside a concrete warehouse half swallowed by vines. Evelyn killed her headlights. The letters above the rusted door were faint but unmistakable. Novatech Research, Division 7, her company's old R&D wing, shut down after the fire. Noah unlocked the door with an old badge and slipped inside. Evelyn stared through the windshield, heartbeat drumming. Why would a janitor have clearance to a dead division of her own company? And why every Friday did he return to the ashes of something that no longer existed? Curiosity burned hotter than fear. She stepped out of the car and followed him into the dark. Evelyn waited until Noah's shadow disappeared through the cracked doorway before stepping out of her car. The air was heavy with dust and engine oil. A padlock dangled uselessly from the side fence, and the faint smell of ozone hung in the cold. She hesitated, then pulled the handle. The door groaned open, just enough for her to slip inside. The interior was nothing like she expected. It wasn't empty, and it wasn't abandoned. Faint light spilled from a row of hanging lamps, illuminating workbenches littered with wires, bolts, and metallic limbs. Motors hummed quietly. On the far side of the room stood Noah, sleeves rolled up, goggles perched on his forehead. He wasn't mopping floors now, he was soldering something intricate, his movement steady and precise. Evelyn crouched behind a broken cabinet, pulse hammering. On the wall behind him hung the old Novatech Dynamics logo, its blue edges burnt from the fire that closed this division. She could see 3 men sitting near the center table, older, weathered, one missing a leg, another with a half-formed prosthetic arm, the third confined to a wheelchair. They watched Noah work with quiet faith. "Almost done," he said softly. His voice carried none of the muteness it had at headquarters. "You'll feel a little resistance this time, Mac. Don't fight it. Just think about lifting." Evelyn blinked. Resistance? Lifting? Noah stepped aside and nodded to the man beside him. The man Mock looked down at the dull metal attached to the stump of his left arm. For a moment nothing happened. Then a faint whir filled the silence. Fingers made of mismatched alloys twitched, then curled into a fist. The man gasped, the sound halfway between disbelief and laughter. "It's moving," he whispered. "Doc, I can feel it move." "Not bad for junkyard tech, huh?" Noah grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Try flexing again." "Gentle." Mac did. The prosthetic opened and closed with fluid precision, cables tightening like living tendons. The other veterans clapped, one of them laughing so hard his voice cracked. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had spent years presenting lifeless prototypes to investors, claiming Novatech was redefining mobility. Yet here, in this decaying wing of her own company, a janitor had done it with scraps. "Doc Finch, you're a damn magician," one of the men said. Doc Finch. Evelyn mouthed the name silently. Noah only smiled. "No magic, Carl. Just patience, and a little faith in things people throw away." He turned back to his tools, careful, methodical. Around him were half-assembled prosthetic limbs, each one tagged with names written in marker. Evelyn recognized parts from old models Novatech had scrapped years ago when new versions failed. Corporate testing, she had ordered their disposal herself. The sight of them now restored, repurposed, working, made her chest ache. The veterans began talking softly, voices rough with gratitude. One of them mentioned how Noah spent his paychecks buying old servo kits from auctions. Another said he refused to take donations. He fixed what he could, gave it away, and came back every Friday like clockwork. "He says Friday's the day his wife used to help him here," one man whispered. Evelyn froze. She glanced back at Noah. His expression had softened. eyes lingering on a small photograph taped above the workbench. A woman smiling beside a young girl, both wearing lab coats with Novatech logos. Beneath it a line was handwritten in ink faded by time. "We build to heal." The silence around her shifted from suspicion to something heavier. She wasn't looking at theft. She was looking at grief turned into creation. Noah leaned over another bench, reassembling a joint motor. Sparks flickered as he welded a new connector. His hands moved with a confidence Evelyn recognized only in real engineers, the kind who built because they believed. Her breath caught when she saw a corporate ID badge, burnt at the edges, hanging beside his tool rack. Noah Finch, Senior Design Engineer. She shut her eyes for a moment. She remembered the name now buried in an old report. The engineer blamed for the Aurora fire that had shut down Division 7. A report she had signed when she first became CEO. The faulty wiring that cost lives. He had vanished after the tragedy. Except he hadn't vanished. He'd stayed, cleaning her offices by day and rebuilding his dream by night. Evelyn's phone buzzed in her pocket. She silenced it immediately, heart jumping. Noah turned slightly, scanning the room. For a moment she thought he'd seen her, but he only rubbed his eyes and went back to work. The veterans began packing their tools, thanking him as they prepared to leave. "Next Friday?" one asked. "Same time," Noah said. "Bring the new sensor pads. And don't worry, I'll figure out the voltage issue before then." When the last of them had gone, he sat alone on the workbench, head bowed, hands clasped. The faint hum of generators filled the silence. Evelyn remained hidden, her mind a storm. Everything she thought she knew about loyalty, about progress, about him was unraveling. He wasn't stealing, he was saving. Not hoarding technology, but returning it to people her company had priced out of its premium products. Still, the CEO inside her whispered about liability, protocol, exposure. If this came out, Novatech could face lawsuits. But another voice, the human one she rarely listened to, asked a simpler question. What if he's right? She leaned against the cold wall, her breath shallow. The old emblem above the door caught her eye again, light glinting off the metal letters, Novatech Research. Division. The place that was supposed to have burned out of existence was alive. Her eyes drifted back to Noah, who was now adjusting the grip strength of the new prosthetic hand, testing it against a block of wood. The mechanical fingers flexed easily, precise and quiet. He smiled faintly, satisfied. Evelyn's chest tightened again, envy, admiration, maybe shame. She couldn't tell. For years she'd chased the future from behind glass conference walls. This man, whom everyone ignored, had built it quietly from the ashes. She checked the time, almost midnight. Slowly she stepped back toward the exit. Still hidden, still unsure what to do. Fire him, promote him, expose him. None of the options felt right. At the doorway she looked back one last time. Noah sat alone beneath the flickering lights, surrounded by broken limbs and new beginnings. The thought came uninvited but clear. He isn't the problem. He's the reminder of what we lost. Evelyn slipped out into the cold night, her shoes crunching against the gravel. The door closed softly behind her, but the image stayed. The janitor, the engineer, the healer, working in silence where the company had turned its back. The theft, she realized, was never his. It was hers. The clang of metal shattered the quiet. A single wrench rolled across the concrete floor, bouncing twice before coming to rest against a toolbox. Noah's head jerked up. His eyes swept the dim space, every line of his body going rigid. Evelyn froze behind a rusted support beam, heart hammering. She'd been careful, too careful. But the tool had slipped from her coat pocket when she shifted her weight. "Who's there?" His voice wasn't the mild, compliant tone she knew from the office. It was sharp, steady, commanding. The kind of voice used to giving orders in a lab, not taking them. Evelyn stepped out slowly, palms raised in reflex. "It's me," she said. Noah's expression flickered from alarm to disbelief to something colder. "Of course it is," he murmured. "I should have guessed the company couldn't leave well enough alone." "I followed you," she admitted. "You left early. You used a restricted facility. And you thought I was stealing," he finished for her. "Because that's what you'd expect from someone who cleans your floors." The words stung. "This isn't about that. You have no authorization to be here. These materials belong to Novatech." He laughed, quiet, humorless. "You mean the same Novatech that tossed them in a dumpster? The same one that called this place a liability?" Evelyn stiffened. "They're dangerous prototypes. Faulty equipment could kill someone. You can't." "Can't?" He cut her off, stepping closer. his face illuminated by the soft glow of the workbench lamp. "Tell that to the man who just shook my hand tonight for the first time in 6 years." Her reply faltered on her lips. The smell of solder and oil filled the silence between them. He stared at her, unblinking. "You don't even remember me, do you?" Evelyn frowned. "You're a maintenance employee. You've been with us, what? 9, 10 years. 15, he said quietly. "And before that I was your lead robotics designer. Division 7. Neural Link Project." The title hit her like a slap. She had read those old reports years ago when she first became CEO. Division 7. The fire, the casualties. The internal scandal that nearly bankrupted Novatech. "You were part of the Aurora team," she said slowly. "I led it," he said, "until the day it burned." Evelyn searched his face. "That fire killed 3 engineers. 4, Noah corrected. One of them was my wife." The silence turned heavy, thick enough to choke on. The flickering overhead bulb hummed like static. "I saw your name in the report," she whispered. "They blamed faulty wiring." "They blamed me," he said. "The perfect scapegoat. I designed the stabilizer module. When the circuit failed, it overloaded the system. I told them the specs were wrong, that Crane had cut corners on insulation to save money. Nobody listened. They buried the file, paid out insurance, and scrubbed my record. I buried my wife and signed a janitor's contract just to stay close to what was left." Evelyn's chest tightened. "You stayed here for this?" "I stayed," he said, "because I couldn't walk away from what we were building. Because what we made was supposed to give people their lives back, not pad someone's quarterly earnings." She tried to keep her voice steady. "Even if your intentions were good, this isn't how it works. There are protocols, safety checks, approvals. You're risking people's lives." He stepped closer until only the hum of the generator separated them. "You're talking about protocols," he said. "The same ones that let executives ignore reports, let faulty parts pass inspection, let a team die because delay costs more than conscience." The words landed like blows. Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I've spent every Friday rebuilding what you all abandoned," he said, quieter now. "Those men who come here, they're soldiers, accident victims, people who got told maybe next year while your board voted on marketing budgets. You call it risk. I call it repair." She couldn't meet his eyes. The authority that had always come so naturally to her felt like an empty suit of armor. "Why didn't you leave? You could have started over somewhere else." "I tried," he said simply. "But no one hires a man with a tragedy attached to his name, so I took the only job they offered me, cleaning the same hallways I used to design from. Thought maybe one day I'd find a way to make it right." His voice cracked just enough for her to hear the exhaustion behind it. Evelyn looked around the room, the prosthetic arms, the labeled parts, the burn marks on the old walls. Every piece of metal here was a fragment of guilt, repurposed into redemption. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked softly. "Tell who?" he said. "The people who erased me, the board that ordered my clearance revoked. You think they'd care that a janitor was fixing what their greed broke?" Her throat tightened. "You're breaking the law, Noah." "I'm fixing the damage the law allowed," he replied. Neither spoke for a long time. The faint sound of a generator pulsed like a heartbeat. Finally he said, "You came looking for a thief. What did you find, Ms. Hart?" She wanted to say a liability, but what rose instead was quieter, more dangerous, a reminder. Evelyn exhaled, slow and uneven. "I don't know yet." Noah nodded once, as if that was enough. "Then go, before you have to decide." She didn't move. His eyes softened, just a fraction. "You're not the first to forget what Novatech used to mean," he said. "But maybe you can be the first." The generator buzzed, and the smell of burnt solder hung in the air. Evelyn turned toward the door, her heels echoing in the empty space. Each step sounded heavier than the last. At the threshold she glanced back. Noah was already bent over his workbench again, torch in hand, steady as ever. The same man she'd dismissed for years, holding together the very ideals her company had lost. For the first time she didn't see a janitor. She saw the engineer who had never stopped building. Noah didn't ask her to sit. He didn't need to. The air itself seemed heavy with memory, with the ghosts of machines that had once hummed in perfect rhythm before the fire silenced them. He walked to a locked cabinet in the corner, old metal warped by heat. With a careful hand, he twisted the handle until it clicked open. From inside he pulled a weathered binder, its edges black and curling. He laid it on the workbench between them. "Here," he said quietly. "This is what they buried." Evelyn stepped closer. The pages were singed, The ink blurred but legible. She saw circuit schematics, neural mapping grids, biometric feedback loops, designs that looked decades ahead of their time. Her breath caught as she recognized the early foundation of Novatech's current neural link interface. "These are yours?" she asked. "Ours," Noah corrected. "Mine and hers." He turned one page carefully. The margin notes were in two distinct handwritings, his tight and neat, hers looping in bold. A small red heart was drawn next to one of the test diagrams. He hit it with the side of his thumb. "My wife, Mara, was the lead tester," he said. "She believed we could merge human intent directly with synthetic response. Thought prosthetics shouldn't just move, but feel." She pushed it fast. "The stabilizer malfunctioned during a trial. You know the..." Evelyn swallowed hard. "The Aurora fire." He nodded. "The day the company's soul burned with it." He flipped another page. The schematic was labeled Model EA101, Empathic Response Prototype. Half of it was crossed out, the other half redrawn with salvaged components penciled in. "You rebuilt it," she said, disbelief softening her voice. He gestured to the machines around them. "From scrap, from the junk you threw away when new investors demanded cost cuts. I built it with what I had: old servo drivers, broken sensors, a power cell from a decommissioned drone. It's not pretty, but it worked. Enough to give someone a hand that listens instead of just obeys." Evelyn scanned the notes. It wasn't crude. It was genius hidden under grime. The neural feedback model was clean, elegant, more efficient than anything her own research teams had managed with millions in funding. "This could change everything," she murmured. "It already has," he said. "For the few who needed it, not the many who could afford it." He opened another folder and spread out a series of photographs. Soldiers, workers, amputees, each wearing a mismatched prosthetic arm or leg, each smiling awkwardly but freely. Evelyn felt something stir in her chest. Pride, maybe, or guilt. "Do you know what the company said when I tried to submit these results?" Noah asked. "They called it unauthorized testing. They called it reckless. They said innovation had to be fiscally scalable. Those protocols exist for safety," she said, though her tone was weak, half-hearted. He smiled sadly. "No, they exist for control, for ownership. The only thing that really scared them was that someone without a title might make something that didn't need them."
Evelyn's eyes lingered on the photographs.
"You could have gone to another company, Noah. Someone would have funded this. They would have patented it," he replied, "and sold it back to the same people who lost their limbs in wars built on profit. That's not progress. That's recycling misery for revenue." His words cut deeper than he probably knew. Evelyn turned the last page and saw the Novatech logo stamped faintly on the corner of the original design document, an official prototype report. Underneath it was the final signature authorizing project termination. Her stomach dropped. She knew the name. Hillel Crane. Lucas Crane, her current chief financial officer, the same man who had sat beside her in every board meeting, warning her that Novatech couldn't afford sentimentality. She looked up, realization dawning. "He signed this." Noah met her gaze. "He signed the shutdown, the insurance claim, and the public statement that blamed me." Her throat tightened, and the board believed him. "They didn't have to," Noah said. "He was the board. They promoted him after it was over." Evelyn turned away, pressing a hand to her mouth. All these years, the numbers that haunted her quarterly reports, the gradual decline in innovation, it all traced back here, to the ashes of this division and the man they destroyed to save themselves. "This design," she whispered, touching the scorched edge of the page. "If it's completed, it could fix everything. Novatech's failures, the debt, the investors' exodus." Noah cut her off. "You don't understand. This isn't a fix. It's a second chance, but not for your company." Evelyn blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned on the workbench, eyes burning steady into hers. "You're thinking about balance sheets. I'm thinking about people. You'll fund this, yes. You'll build it, refine it, perfect it, and then you'll patent it, lock it behind lawyers and sell it to the same people I'm trying to help for free." "That's not fair," she snapped. "I'm offering to make it real, to bring it out of this basement. And I'm telling you," he said, voice rising, "that it already is real. You're just too high up to see it." The words echoed through the cavernous room. For a moment, the hum of machines filled the silence between them. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "If you keep hiding here, you'll never reach more than a handful of people. Don't you want this to scale, to help thousands?" He smiled, weary but certain. "Not if it means it stops being help. When things scale, they forget the faces that built them." She stared at him. This man covered in soot and solder burns. This janitor who spoke like a prophet. You can't build a future without money, Noah. And you can't build a soul out of it, he said. The simplicity of the reply silenced her. Noah turned the blueprint toward her and traced a line with his finger. She died testing this link. The last thing Mara said to me was, make sure it feels like them. Not like a machine. Not like profit. Like them. You can't patent that. Evelyn's voice softened. I could protect it, fund it under Novatech. You'd have every resource we could. He shook his head. You'd bury it in NDAs and brand campaigns before it ever reached the people who need it. I'm not giving it to another corporation. Not even yours. You think I'm the enemy? She asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his tone had no malice, only truth. I think you forgot what side you started on. Her gaze dropped to the blackened logo on the folder. For the first time, she didn't see a company emblem. She saw a gravestone. Noah gently closed the binder. Go home, Miss Hart. Let the ghost stay here with me. She stood there for a moment, speechless, the faint hum of machinery filling the gap where her authority used to be. Then she turned toward the exit, the old concrete floor echoing beneath her steps. When she reached the door, she looked back. Noah was bent over the bench again, pencil in hand, drawing in the margins of the design his wife never got to finish. Evelyn felt the weight of every decision she'd ever signed, and for the first time she didn't know whether saving Novatech meant redemption or ruin. The next morning, Evelyn didn't summon security. She summoned courage. By noon, her car was parked outside the same derelict building, its cracked walls glinting in the sunlight. She walked in without hesitation this time. Noah was there, as always, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by the familiar symphony of wires and motors. He looked up briefly. Back to shut me down officially? No, she said, steady. Back to make a deal. His brow lifted, skeptical. Deals are how we got here. Evelyn took a breath. 1 month. You get full access to Novatech's main lab equipment, materials, whatever you need. You'll rebuild your design with full support. But when it's done, we evaluate it properly. Noah set down his wrench. Evaluate it? For potential production. He laughed, quiet but cutting. And once it passes, you'll wrap it in a shiny patent and sell it for 10 times what anyone can afford. I'm not here to argue profit, she said. I'm trying to rebuild what you lost. He studied her, expression unreadable. You're trying to rebuild what you lost, he said finally. A reputation, investors, control. The words hit, too close to the truth. Evelyn folded her arms. You want to help people? Prove it. Use my lab. But if you really care about this tech, you'll need resources that only Novatech can offer. He turned away, thinking. The hum of machinery filled the silence. Finally, he said, one condition. The results stay open source for veterans, for anyone who needs it. You don't own it. No patents, no price tags. Evelyn hesitated. Open source meant giving away intellectual property suicidal for a company hanging by a thread. But his eyes told her this was the only way forward. She nodded once. Fine. 1 month. Open results. Noah extended his hand, rough and steady. Then we build. 2 days later he walked through Novatech's gleaming glass doors. No mop bucket. No uniform. Just an access badge, and a calm that unnerved everyone. The engineering floor went silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Whispers replaced them. That's the janitor, right? Someone murmured. Why is he in R&D? Another whispered. Evelyn ignored them, leading Noah past the line of curious faces. This is your workspace, she said, gesturing toward the reserved innovation bay. Everything you asked for is here. Noah scanned the room. 3D printers, neural servers, precision arms, tools he hadn't touched in over a decade. His fingers twitched as if remembering old muscle memory. It smells too clean, he muttered. Evelyn almost smiled. Try not to ruin that. He got to work immediately. For hours he said nothing. The younger engineers, half amused and half contemptuous, gathered nearby to watch. They expected clumsy fumbling, an old man lost among advanced systems. Instead, they watched him calibrate sensors by ear, bypass system errors faster than their automated diagnostics. By the end of the first day, he'd corrected a voltage drift in their Neuralink prototype that had baffled the team for months. Your equations were right, he told one engineer gently, but your assumptions weren't human enough. They didn't know what that meant, but they nodded anyway. Evelyn observed from the balcony above, arms folded. There was no arrogance in the way he worked, no showmanship, no need to be right, just precision born from purpose. She'd built entire departments around efficiency, yet none of them moved like this man who refused to see himself as part of her hierarchy. By week 2, the tone of the floor had changed. The same engineers who once mocked him now hovered nearby, asking questions. Why not use the standard feedback chip? Why reverse the signal path? How are you mapping intent data without overloading the CIS? He answered them all with patience. Because bodies aren't perfect circuits. You design like people are machines. I design like machines should be people. Evelyn, who'd once spoken in financial ratios, found herself silent whenever he talked that way. Together they rebuilt the Neuralink prototype from scratch. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't marketable, but it worked. The prosthetic hand moved with astonishing accuracy, following not just muscle impulses but subtle emotional cues from the user's neural response. He called it Echo. When the first internal demo took place, the lab was packed. The volunteers were veterans who had agreed to test the new interface. One man, sleeves rolled up, attached the device, wires connected from his shoulder to the central node. Just think about moving, Noah said. The man hesitated, then clenched his jaw, and the hand obeyed. Perfectly. Applause broke out. Some of the engineers actually cheered. Evelyn felt something loosen inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Noah turned to her quietly after the test. Don't thank me yet. We're halfway there. She shook her head. You don't get it. You just saved this company. He met her eyes. I'm not here to save your company. I'm here to save what it was meant to be. That night, Evelyn stayed long after everyone else had left. The lab lights glowed over the finished prototype, still warm from the trial. She walked to the bench and ran her fingers along the metallic surface. There was a name etched on the underside in rough handwriting, Mara Finch. She looked up at the observation window where Noah stood silently, arms crossed. Their eyes met, hers full of questions, his of quiet defiance. I read her file, she said softly. She was brilliant. She still is, he said. Every line of that code started with her notes. Evelyn nodded, voice low. We'll make sure she's remembered. He shook his head. Just make sure her work stays free. She didn't argue. Not this time. For once there was no distance between CEO and janitor, between boardroom ambition and workshop integrity. There was only the hum of machines, the faint scent of solder, and the shared recognition that something alive had been reborn from ashes. Evelyn glanced at the glowing interface, the soft pulsing light at its core. Echo, she murmured. It's a good name. Noah smiled faintly. It's what the world deserves. A response. She looked around the lab, the quiet awe of her staff, the shimmering promise of progress built without greed, and knew the truth. Her company's salvation wasn't in reclaiming control, it was in learning to let go. For the first time in years, Evelyn Hart believed Novatech might deserve to exist again. The applause from the lab demonstration still echoed in Evelyn's ears as she walked the quiet corridors toward her office. The memory of the veteran's hand, steady, precise, writing his name for the first time in years, sat in her like a small, fierce light. She had recorded the whole moment on her phone, the clip tucked away in her pocket like proof that something real still existed under the company's blue logo. She rounded a corner and found Lucas Crane waiting outside the executive suite, hands folded, face perfectly composed. He always wore composure like armor. Tonight the armor looked more like a cage. Evelyn, he said pleasantly, we need to talk about Division 7. She stopped, phone in hand. The thrill from the lab curdled for a moment. We don't have time. We do, Lucas cut in. Board members are anxious. Investors are nervous. There are rumors. A janitor in R&D is not the kind of press that attracts capital. He's not a janitor, she said. He's the reason people can move their hands again. Lucas's mouth thinned. He didn't look at her like a colleague pleading to be believed. He looked at her like a general planning a campaign. People with names like Noah Finch make for messy narratives. They muddy the intellectual property. They complicate exits. Evelyn bristled. So you'd rather sell the work to the highest bidder than let it help people? It's not about preference, Lucas said smoothly. It's about survival. We are hemorrhaging cash. If we don't find a buyer, we'll be liquidated. If we demonstrate a working neural link, we increase our leverage. If the market believes we have an asset, real, scalable, we get offers. If we control the narrative, we control the outcome. He paused, letting the logic land. You don't understand the scale of what's needed to keep this company afloat. She saw for the first time the arithmetic in his eyes. The spreadsheets, the shareholder calls, The slow erosion of lines on financial charts. Prophet had a face smooth, calculating, and utterly untroubled by the smell of solder or the quiet gratitude of a veteran. For Lucas, outcomes were measured in exit multiples and non-disclosure clauses. Bring it in on our terms, he continued. Let the board run the trial. Let legal handle IP. We preserve value. And we destroy what it's for, Evelyn said. Lucas smiled thinly. You're idealistic. That's not a crime until it costs people money. We can't gamble the company on sentiment. He walked with her to her office and left her there with a single certainty. He was already moving. The certainty translated into immediate covert action. Meanwhile, back in Lab 4, Noah packed up the tools while the veteran he had helped sat in the observation chair, trembling with a grin. The veteran curled a scrap of paper between fingers grown numb for years and, like a child relearning an alphabet, wrote his name, each letter deliberate, halting, then sure. Tears pooled at his eyes. Noah watched, voice low. Good job, Mac. Keep practicing. Evelyn stepped into the doorway and lifted her phone without thinking. This is what Novatech should be, she whispered into the recording, before turning the camera off and slipping it into her pocket. The hum in the lab felt like a promise. But elsewhere, where decisions were made behind closed doors, Lucas was already framing that promise as a bargaining chip. He called the third-party auditing firm he kept on retainer, one that handled irregular compliance reviews, and quietly, data integrity sweeps. He spoke in the measured cadence of someone rehearsed. We need a full audit of Division 7. Immediately, nothing public. Secure chain of custody protocols. Find any anomalous code, any unauthorized tests, and escalate anything that looks like an IP leakage to legal. His real instruction, the one he didn't put in the formal memo, required a different hand. Lucas tapped a contact in a private messaging thread. A systems operator who owed him favors from an old contract. The operator was discreet and surgical with code. Lucas needed a needle in a haystack, a small undetectable script that would masquerade as a maintenance patch, but quietly siphon telemetry logs and session data to a shell server, while also planting obfuscated signatures that would later be used to prove developer culpability. It had to look like sloppy volunteer tinkering, not corporate espionage. You understand, Lucas said into his phone. We need plausible deniability. Make it look like internal error, bad coding practices, not outside interference. If we do this right, the board will seize and demand consolidation. Stratus will bite. The operator's reply came quick and clinical. I'll make it look like a weekend hack, a lazy Dave's watermark. No more, no less. Lucas exhaled, pleased. He felt the vertigo of control settle into a steady pulse. If public opinion could be steered, so could the shareholders. If the narrative was tugged just so, profit would follow, not because it was right, but because it was inevitable. Back at the lab, the team celebrated quietly. Engineers who had mocked Noah 2 weeks ago now clapped him on the shoulder with genuine warmth. Markham, the senior engineer who had once laughed, kept stealing glances at the prototype like a man learning to read new scripture. Evelyn stood at the edge of the group, watching them with something close to wonder. For a wild, brief instant, she allowed herself to imagine the press coverage, the investors, the turnaround, then the image of Lucas's face pushed into the corner of her mind. She was right to be wary. Later that night, Lucas sat alone in his glass office, reviewing a stream of charts and shareholder notes. He watched footage from the lab, the same clip Evelyn was saving in her phone. He watched the veteran write his name, and felt a ripple of something complicated: envy for how such moments could translate into unquantified goodwill, fear for how intangible goodwill could upend a well-laid exit strategy. He had always been a man who turned feeling into figures. Tonight he turned the image into leverage, a demonstration to attract buyers, an audit to manufacture crisis, a leak to justify a sale. He wrote an email to the board insisting on an immediate, controlled compliance review. He seized legal. He left out the part about the script he had commissioned. In the lab, Noah cleaned his bench and packed away the worn binder with its scorched pages. He did not know about Lucas's call. He did not know about the quiet script being woven into their systems like a spider's silk. He only knew the lighter weight in a man's shoulders who had learned his name again. Outside, the city lights blinked like distant promises. Inside the glass towers, another kind of machinery whirred, one of strategy, of leverage, of hunger dressed as prudence. The two machines hummed toward each other along different tracks, and Evelyn stood between them, recording a miracle while the man who would try to sell it watched from the shadows, already laying his trap. The day of the investor rehearsal began with optimism that felt almost reckless. The lab gleamed under fresh lights, and Evelyn moved through it with restless energy. Every camera, every sensor, every inch of the new Echo prototype had been checked twice. She had personally invited the board to watch a closed simulation before the official demonstration. Noah arrived early, his sleeves rolled, his hands calm. He moved differently now, not like a man who belonged in the shadows, but like one who'd earned the right to stand in his own light. Even the skeptical engineers watched him with quiet respect. Once this runs smoothly, Evelyn told him, we'll be unstoppable. Noah gave a thin smile. Just remember, machines don't care about applause. She laughed softly, though a trace of unease lingered beneath her ribs. At 9:00 a.m. the trial began. The veteran volunteer sat in the chair, electrodes attached. The hum of power rose, gentle and familiar. The digital metrics glowed steady green. For a few blissful minutes, everything worked. Then the numbers shifted. A flicker on the display. A faint, stuttering pulse in the motors. A sound like a strained breath escaping the system. "What's happening?" Evelyn asked, leaning over the console. Markham frowned. "Power surge." "No, wait, there's a conflict in the control protocol." The hum became a rattle. Motors seized with a harsh metallic grind. Alarms wailed as the system's interface bled from green to red. "Emergency shutdown," someone shouted. Noah lunged forward, disconnecting the neural cable before feedback could travel through. Sparks popped from the actuator joint. The prosthetic froze mid-motion, locked in a death grip. The lights flickered once, then died. Silence. Everyone stared at the smoldering device, their miracle-turned corpse. And then from the back of the room came Lucas Crane's voice. Cool, composed, perfectly timed.
"What in God's name happened here?"
Noah straightened, his breathing ragged. "System malfunction. Could be." Lucas raised a hand. "Could be sabotage, could be negligence. Logs will tell us." He turned to the board members who had come to observe. "You see why I warned you about letting unverified contractors access our systems. This is what happens when emotion replaces structure." Evelyn's mouth opened to speak, but one of the investors cut her off. "Is this true, Ms. Hart? You allowed an unlicensed technician to operate proprietary tech." She tried to explain the 1-month pilot, the results. The veterans helped, but the words sounded small against the alarms still echoing in their ears. Lucas leaned on the table, voice steady. "Until we determine the source of this breach, I recommend immediate suspension of the external operator. Company policy demands it." All eyes turned to Noah. He didn't flinch. "You think I'd break the thing I built?" Lucas's reply came like a verdict. "I think accidents happen when amateurs play scientist." The insult hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. Evelyn's instinct was to defend him, but behind Lucas's controlled outrage, she saw the board's faces cold, calculating, afraid of risk. Her career teetered on the edge of their judgment. Noah's voice softened. "It's fine." She turned toward him sharply. "It's not fine. It's better than you losing your seat," he said quietly. "Let them think what they need to." 2 security officers appeared in the doorway, summoned by no one but expected by everyone. Evelyn's chest constricted as they approached him. He placed the prototype gently on the bench, like setting down something alive. "You'll fix this," he said to her, "but not if you start believing them." The guards took him by the arm. No struggle, no words, just the dull echo of their footsteps as they led him out of the lab. Evelyn stood frozen until the sound faded. Then she turned to Lucas. "You wanted this." He raised an eyebrow. "I wanted accountability." "Don't insult me," she said. "You never wanted him here." "Correct," he said simply. "And now, neither do the investors. We'll restore your credibility, Evelyn. But the janitor, he's done." He left her with that word, done, echoing in the sterile silence. That night, Evelyn didn't go home. She sat alone in her office, city lights flickering across the floor. Her reflection in the glass looked foreign. A woman who'd just let the only honest person in the building take the fall for her survival. She replayed the moment the system failed again and again in her head. The exact second the signals went haywire, something about it bothered her. The power distribution anomaly didn't match any known error pattern. It wasn't chaos. It was coordinated. She opened the internal logs, line after line of system data scrolled past, most of it routine, until she found it, an unauthorized script, nested inside a maintenance directory labeled innocuously as syspatch LC1. It had a signature tag, encrypted but faintly visible in the metadata. User ID, L. Crane admin. Her stomach turned cold. She leaned back, staring at the screen. The malfunction hadn't been an accident. It had been planted. Lucas hadn't just used the failure, he'd built it. Evelyn exhaled through clenched teeth, fury shaking the composure she'd worn for years. The company she'd tried to save was rotting from the inside. Her mind replayed Noah's last words before leaving the lab. "You'll fix this, but not if you start believing them." She opened her drawer, pulled out the flash drive that held Noah's latest prototype data, and slipped it into her pocket. Her reflection stared back at her, calm and resolute. If Lucas Crane wanted control, he'd just declared war to get it. And this time she wasn't going to let him win. The office was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Evelyn sat at her desk, the glow of her monitor spilling across stacks of unread reports. She couldn't look away from the system log still ton on her screen, the one stamped with Lucas Crane's ID. It wasn't just a glitch, it was a signature. She leaned forward, scanning the directory again. There were backups nested beneath the corrupted data. Compressed, encrypted. Finch Aurora logs. Her pulse kicked. She inserted the flash drive she'd kept from Noah's last data transfer and ran a decryption script. Lines of code unfolded into text, then into words, then into history. The files weren't system backups. They were his private journals, Noah's own written record of the Aurora fire. March 14th, 11:27. Power limit override initiated by executive order. Crane insists the stabilizers will hold. Mara's asking for another test delay. She's right, we're not ready. But he won't listen. Evelyn's stomach turned as she scrolled. Each entry was a breadcrumb through chaos. Timelines, directives, voice transcripts, and then the line that froze her. Emergency cutoff locked. Access restricted to El Sitcher Strine, admin. The surge hit before we could disengage. Flames through the east wall. Mara still inside. Her hand flew to her mouth. The official report had blamed Noah's reckless calibration. But the truth was right here. Lucas had overridden the safety parameters remotely, forcing an unstable prototype online to impress investors. His negligence had killed her and destroyed everything that came after. It wasn't just one crime. There were years of them, hidden under acquisitions, technology consolidation, strategic outsourcing, dozens of patents, all stripped from their true creators, employees, contractors, engineers who'd been laid off or bought out for pennies. Lucas hadn't managed the board. He had fed on it. Evelyn's empathy turned to fury so sharp she almost trembled. For months she'd fought to save a company he'd already hollowed out from within. She copied everything, every entry, every signature, and encrypted the folder under a new name, Reclamation. Then she picked up her phone. The call went unanswered. The first 3 times. On the 4th, a tired voice broke through the static. "You shouldn't be calling me." "Noah," she said. "I found your logs." A long silence. Then wary disbelief. "You shouldn't have." "I had to. They prove what happened that night. The override, the deaths, everything Lucas covered up. You were never at fault." He let out a quiet breath that trembled at the edges. "I stopped needing vindication a long time ago." "This isn't about you," she said. "It's about all the people he stole from. You kept records because some part of you knew this day would come." He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried the weight of old wounds. "Even if you show the truth, it won't matter. They'll bury it again. They always do. Not if we make it public." "No," he said sharply. "You'll lose your job, your board, your reputation." "Let me lose them," she cut in. "But we don't hide anymore. We don't let him use your work to sell another lie." There was another pause, softer this time. "Then you really think they'll believe the janitor?" "They'll believe what they see." She outlined her plan quickly. Another demonstration, this time public, streamed through Novatech's official channels. The new Neuralink prototype, rebuilt under her clearance. The technology's potential paired with the data logs proving Lucas's crimes. Truth and proof, side by side. When she finished, Noah's silence stretched long. Finally he said, "You'd do all this for what?" "Justice." "For clarity," she said. "For the people who died because of what he did, and for the ones who'll live if we finish what you started." A faint laugh, small but real, came through the line. "You sound like her," he said. "Mara, she used to believe every problem had a clean fix." "She wasn't wrong," Evelyn said. "She was just early." The next night, under cover of the audit Lucas himself had ordered, Evelyn reinstated Noah's security credentials. His ID, once marked terminated, now read Consultant, Division 7. When he stepped into the lab again, the space fell silent. Some engineers avoided his eyes. Others nodded in apology they couldn't voice. Evelyn was waiting at the far end of the floor. "Welcome back," she said quietly. I don't know if I'm back, he replied. But I'm here. He placed his old binder on the table, the one scorched by the Aurora fire, and looked at her. If we do this, we do it clean. No edits, no PR. The people watching need to see everything. The machine, the data, the truth. I agree, she said. We show them who Novatech really is, and who it could be. For the first time, they weren't CEO and employee, savior and exile. They were equals, standing over the ashes of a company they both had reason to hate but refused to abandon. Noah began rebuilding the demonstration setup. Evelyn stayed late, cross-checking timestamps, aligning footage, threading the confession of data into the presentation's code. Every keystroke was a quiet act of rebellion. Markham joined them silently. Whatever you're planning, he said, count me in. That thing we built, it deserves a better story than this. Evelyn gave a rare, tired smile. It's going to get one. By dawn, the plan was set. The demonstration would stream live to every investor, partner and media contact tied to Novatech. The public would see the same miracle, the prosthetic responding to human intent. But this time, the data feeds would be transparent. Embedded in the stream would be the decrypted Aurora files, broadcast in real time, irrefutable and irreversible. As they prepared the final sync, Evelyn stood beside Noah, at the console. The first rays of sunlight touched the lab's glass wall, catching the metallic surface of the exoskeleton and scattering it like gold. This place looks different in daylight, she said. He nodded. Truth usually does. She turned toward him, eyes steady. You once told me you don't build for applause. What do you build for? He glanced at the machine, its sensors humming quietly. For peace, he said. And sometimes peace requires a little war. Their eyes met, hers fierce, his calm, and for a heartbeat, Novatech felt alive again. Not as a corporation, but as an idea reborn. Tomorrow, they would walk into the same boardroom Lucas Crane had poisoned and light a fire of their own. The auditorium shimmered with camera flashes and polished smiles, the kind that preceded corporate theater. Reporters filled every row, their murmurs a low, expectant hum. Screens behind the stage displayed the Novatech logo, newly redesigned under Lucas Crane's direction. The press release had called it a vision forward, merger announcement and new leadership era. Lucas stood near the podium, immaculate as ever, a calm predator in a tailored suit. He scanned the room like a man already tasting victory. His eyes drifted toward the wings, where Evelyn waited, clipboard in hand, her expression unreadable. He leaned close as she passed. You'll thank me for this, he murmured. Stratus Robotics will stabilize our stock and clean up your mess. Keep your speech short and I'll handle the details. She smiled faintly. You always did like handling the details. He took it as compliance. That was his first mistake. The second was underestimating what she'd brought with her. Good morning, Evelyn began as she took the stage. Her voice was steady, tempered steel under velvet. Thank you all for joining us on this important day for Novatech. Lucas stood at the edge of the platform, flanked by two board members, his hands clasped in polite authority. Cameras turned toward her, light flashing across her face. For years, she continued, we've described ourselves as a company built on innovation, but innovation without integrity is just spectacle. That earned a faint ripple of confusion from the audience. Lucas frowned. Today, she went on, we're not here to talk about a merger. We're here to talk about something much bigger, something we've hidden long enough. The screens behind her flickered. The Novatech logo dissolved into a live feed from the lab. Gasps rippled through the room. On screen, a veteran in a dark shirt sat in a chair, cables attached to his shoulder. Beside him stood Noah Finch. Lucas took a step forward, his composure cracking. What is this? Evelyn ignored him. You've all heard the rumors about our research setbacks, our financial strain. What you haven't seen, what no one has, is what real innovation looks like when it's done for people, not profit. On screen, Noah's calm voice carried through the hall. All right, Mac. Just think about lifting your hand. The veteran hesitated, then focused. The prosthetic arm responded instantly. Smooth, fluid, alive. The metal fingers curled with precision, then opened again. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause, the sound swelling like a tide. Evelyn waited until it peaked, then raised her hand for silence. This, she said, gesturing toward the display, is the culmination of the Aurora Initiative, a neural link system developed years ago, buried under bureaucracy and deceit. Lucas's face had gone pale. Cut the feed, he hissed to the tech crew. Now. No one moved. Evelyn turned toward him. Don't worry, Lucas. You'll get your part in the story. She tapped a control on the podium. The screen split, the live feed shrinking to one side as a series of documents filled the other. Emails, reports, transaction logs. Each carried his name. The audience leaned forward as the truth unfolded in real time. From Lizel Crane, admin. To R&D executive team. Subject: Aurora prototype schedule. Proceed with the demonstration. Delay is not acceptable. Override safety protocols if necessary. Investors expect results. Another file appeared. The original Aurora fire report. Evelyn's voice trembled as she read the section aloud. Emergency cutoff disabled by executive override. Origin: L. Crane, admin. Casualties 3 confirmed, including lead tester Mara Finch. The air left the room. Reporters froze mid-keystroke. Lucas surged forward. You have no authority to present classified material. Evelyn turned, eyes blazing. I have every authority to tell the truth. She advanced on him, each word sharper than the last. You destroyed lives to protect your margins. You buried engineers, silenced witnesses, and built your career on their ashes. And you called it leadership. Security personnel, uncertain who to obey, held their ground. Lucas's voice cracked with anger. You're finished, Evelyn. You and that janitor of yours. The word janitor echoed through the room like a spark in dry grass. Evelyn smiled, not kindly. You mean this janitor? She gestured toward the screen again. Noah had stepped forward beside the veteran, the machine still gleaming under lab lights. He looked into the camera, not defiant, just steady. For the record, he said, I built this in a basement because people like him decided it wasn't profitable enough to matter. Applause erupted again, louder, angrier, alive with something bigger than curiosity. Evelyn let it crest before she spoke again. Novatech doesn't belong to the people who manipulate numbers. It belongs to the people who make things work. Behind her, a new set of files appeared, a visual map of stolen patents, all routed through shell companies tied to Lucas Crane. Dozens of designs traced back to one origin, Aurora Division. Lucas lunged toward the console, but 2 security guards moved faster. They caught his arms before he reached her. He struggled, fury twisting his face. You think this will save you? You've violated every non-disclosure clause in the book. I'll sue you into the ground. You won't have time, Evelyn said quietly. From the side entrance, 2 uniformed agents entered. Corporate regulators accompanied by city authorities. They moved toward the stage with quiet efficiency. The crowd parted. The cameras zoomed in. Lucas's words faltered as one of the agents handed him a warrant. Lucas Crane, the lead officer said, you are under investigation for corporate negligence, data fraud, and obstruction of federal inquiry. His face drained of color. You can't, but they already had. The next moments unfolded in surreal silence. Cameras clicked, reporters shouted questions. Lucas's voice, once so commanding, was reduced to indignant fragments as he was escorted away. Evelyn watched him go, not triumphant, not cruel, just certain. The truth didn't need celebration, it only needed air. When the noise subsided, she turned back to the audience. For years, she said, we've measured success in profits. Maybe it's time we measure it in honesty. The hall erupted again, this time not with confusion but with conviction. Outside, the story spread like wildfire. Within an hour, the live stream had been clipped, captioned, and shared across every major network. CEO exposes corporate fraud live on stage. Janitor engineer vindicated in Novatech scandal. Aurora fire cover-up confirmed. But inside the building, the world moved slower. In the quiet that followed, Noah walked onto the now empty stage. The seats were deserted, lights dimmed, but the weight of what had happened still hung in the air. Evelyn stood near the podium, her expression softened by exhaustion. They'll call you a hero, she said. He shook his head. Heroes build things that last. I just built something that works. She smiled faintly. That's what lasts. He looked toward the window where daylight poured in, catching the faint reflection of the Novatech logo, fractured now, half removed. You know, he said, for years I mopped these halls thinking nothing could change. Turns out sometimes all it takes is one spark. Evelyn nodded. You lit it. No, he said gently. You carried it. By evening, news crews surrounded the building. The stock, once spiraling toward collapse, began stabilizing as investors realized something new. Honesty had become Novatech's most valuable asset. In the hallway outside the press room, a reporter asked Noah for a statement. He paused, thinking, then simply said, truth doesn't erase the past. It just gives the future a cleaner floor to stand on. The clip went viral. That night, as the city lights flickered across the skyline, Evelyn and Noah stood on the rooftop terrace, watching the swarm of reporters below. "You ever think we'd get here?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I stopped thinking about here a long time ago. I just kept working." The hum of the city rose around them, electric, alive, forgiving. Evelyn exhaled, her voice low. "You changed everything today." "So did you," he said. "You just remembered how." For a long moment they stood in silence, not as CEO and janitor, not as engineer and executive, but as two survivors of the same fire, finally watching the smoke clear. Down below, the Novatech sign flickered, one last spark before the lights steadied, bright and whole again. Justice, finally, had a name, and it wasn't written in profit margins, it was written in truth reclaimed. The world that had once called Novatech a collapsing empire now spoke of Nova Hope Labs. The rebranding wasn't a marketing decision, it was a promise. The sleek glass logo on the new headquarters bore a single etched line beneath the name, "Built for people, not profit." Weeks after the press conference, the city outside still buzzed with the echoes of what had happened. Reporters replayed the footage daily, Lucas Crane being led away in handcuffs, Evelyn Hart standing before the cameras with nothing but truth in her hands, and Noah Finch beside her, silent but unmistakably whole. Inside the rebuilt facility, the noise was different, the steady hum of work soldering irons, gentle laughter and the quiet rhythm of a company rediscovering its soul. Noah stood in what used to be Lab 4, now renamed the Finch Workshop. The space was larger now, lined with benches where young engineers tinkered with open-source prosthetic designs. Veterans sat beside them, testing, advising, sometimes just talking. The technology was still theirs, the patents released freely, the blueprints downloadable by anyone who needed them. Markham stopped by with a grin, wiping grease from his hands. "You know, you could have taken the R&D director title," he said. "It's yours by right." Noah smiled faintly. "Titles make people forget what they're supposed to build. I'd rather keep my hands dirty." Across the room, a little boy fitted with one of the new Echo limbs raised his mechanical hand and waved. The fingers curled smoothly, naturally. Noah waved back, quietly moved. Evelyn's voice broke through the hum. "They're saying that video of him's hit 10 million views," she said, stepping into the lab. He turned. The boy, she confirmed, and the tagline everyone's quoting, "Machines that listen." He chuckled. That was Mara's phrase. "I know," she said softly, "that's why it stays." A week later, Evelyn walked into the city courthouse for the final hearing against the old board. The press swarmed her, microphones flashing. But she didn't flinch. When she took the stand, her voice was calm, stripped of the defensive gloss that had once shielded her. She spoke of oversight, of moral blindness disguised as procedure, of numbers that had replaced names. She confessed her role in protecting a system that rewarded silence. "I thought leadership meant control," she said. "It took losing everything to learn it means responsibility." She refused the settlement offers that would have cushioned her retirement. She forfeited her remaining bonuses to the Victim Relief Fund, set up in memory of the Aurora fire. And when the verdict came, guilty verdicts for negligence, fraud and corporate obstruction, she didn't celebrate, she simply breathed. Outside, reporters crowded again. One asked, "Miss Hart, what's next for you?" She smiled, quiet and sure. "Work." When she returned to Nova Hope, the building smelled faintly of solder and coffee, the scent of rebirth. She found Noah in the courtyard, where sunlight streamed through the high glass dome. The memorial wall stood at the center, engraved with 12 names, the engineers and technicians lost to the Aurora fire. He was replacing the last plaque, the one that read Mara Finch, lead tester. Evelyn stood beside him, watching. "We finally gave her a home." He nodded. "Not just her." He gestured toward the building around them. "All of them." A group of interns passed by, carrying tablets filled with sketches of new prosthetic designs. The hum of their voices carried something rare, hope without agenda. Evelyn folded her arms. "You know, you could take the title too. Head of Humanitarian Engineering has a nice ring." He laughed quietly. "You trying to make me official?" "Trying to make you visible." "I've been invisible long enough," he said. "It's peaceful there. Let's keep it that way." She smiled. "You're impossible. You used to think I was insubordinate." "I still do," she said, and he laughed, the sound startling even himself. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they gathered in the courtyard. Employees, volunteers, veterans, everyone whose life had intersected with the work, stood in a circle around the memorial. Evelyn spoke first. "We built something out of loss," she said. "Something honest. And maybe that's the only kind of foundation that lasts." She turned to Noah. "You once said peace requires a little war. I think we fought ours." He looked around at the faces, the machines, the laughter. "And we won it the right way." The crowd bowed their heads as a moment of silence fell. Not for grief this time, but for gratitude. The lab lights dimmed to a soft gold. Outside, the city skyline glowed like the circuit of a living thing. When the silence lifted, people began to clap. Not the polite applause of an event, but something human, resonant, lasting. Evelyn didn't stop them. Later in her office, she sat by the window overlooking the city. The skyline reflected in the glass, steady and full of light. For years she had carried the invisible weight of decisions that traded morality for profit. Now, for the first time, her conscience was quiet. Noah knocked once and stepped inside. "I'm heading out," he said. "The veterans are testing the new arm models tomorrow. Thought you might want to see it." "I'll be there," she said. "Wouldn't miss it." He hesitated in the doorway. "You did the right thing, Evelyn. That doesn't happen much in this world." She smiled faintly. "I just followed your example." He shook his head. "No. You found your own." When he left, she turned off the office light and looked down at the courtyard below. From this height, the memorial wall glimmered faintly, like a single bright circuit running through the dark. The hum of the building below was soft but alive, a rhythm of progress, not ambition. For the first time since she'd inherited the company, Evelyn Hart felt what leadership was supposed to feel like: service. Not the pressure of endless growth, not the fear of failure, but the quiet satisfaction of guiding something good into existence and knowing it no longer needed you to survive. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling. Outside, dawn began to edge across the horizon. Nova Hope Labs was awake, and this time it would stay that way. The hall shimmered in warm gold light as the veterans' exhibition began. Rows of seats curved around the center stage where a dozen figures stood, each wearing the same quiet pride. The hum of cameras blended with the rustle of the crowd. But when the first prosthetic arm lifted, smooth, fluid, effortless, silence fell. Then another lifted, and another. Dozens of arms rose in unison, fingers spreading wide beneath the lights, the motion so graceful it felt choreographed. The mechanical chorus caught the glow and refracted it like glass, transforming the stage into a constellation of movement, proof that hope could be engineered, piece by piece. At the edge of the crowd, Evelyn Hart stood still, her heart caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. Months of chaos, guilt and rebuilding had led to this, not a corporate launch, not a press stunt, but a living testament to what they had fought for. The crowd began to clap, the sound growing, echoing through the vaulted space. For the first time in years, applause didn't sound hollow. She turned, and there he was. Noah Finch stood a few steps behind her, sleeves rolled, hair streaked with silver, a faint smile tugging at his face. But this wasn't the polite smile of tolerance she'd seen before. This was real, unguarded, warm, alive. The kind of smile that belongs to a man who's finally allowed to rest. He watched the stage quietly. "You remember what you said that first night you followed me?" Evelyn blinked. "That I thought you were stealing company property." He nodded, still watching the veterans move. "You followed a janitor for proof of theft," he said softly, "and found proof of purpose." She exhaled, a laugh caught between pride and emotion. "You make it sound poetic." "It is poetic," he said. "We both lost everything chasing meaning. Turns out we just had to build it instead." The crowd erupted again as one of the veterans lifted both arms high, waving to the audience, one human, one echo prosthetic, moving in flawless synchrony. Children clapped. Reporters filmed. The lights reflected off the metal like morning sun on water. Above them hung a banner, simple white with black letters, "Built to give back." Evelyn's gaze lingered on it. "Do you realize," she said quietly, "that you changed the entire definition of what this company is?" He shook his head. "You changed it. I just reminded it what it was made for." They stood side by side as the veterans began their slow march across the stage. A parade of light, someone called it later, arms gleaming like lanterns of invention and redemption. Each step carried not just movement, but story. Loss turned into motion, grief translated into grace. Noah's voice came low, steady. "When we started this, I just wanted to finish what Mara began. Now I see she was never trying to build a machine. She was building a way for people to feel whole again." Evelyn smiled through a blur of tears. "And now they will." The lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. The veterans raised their arms once more, perfectly synchronized, the final gesture of the night. It wasn't mechanical, it was human. Evelyn reached into her pocket and touched the old keycard she'd kept since the beginning, the one labeled janitorial access. It had been Noah's once. A relic of everything he'd been denied, and everything he'd reclaimed. She handed it to him quietly. "You should have this back." He looked down at it, then shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "Remind yourself that doors open both ways." She laughed softly, nodding. The applause rose again, swelling like thunder. On stage, the veterans bowed as the light from the prosthetics shimmered through the air like 100 tiny suns. Reporters called it the day science remembered its heart. Evelyn and Noah stood beneath the banners as the lights faded. There was no hierarchy now, no CEO, no janitor, just two people who had chosen integrity over ambition and purpose over pride. The applause faded into quiet, leaving only the hum of the machines and the sound of people breathing, whole and unbroken. For the first time, Evelyn didn't feel like she was leading anyone. She simply felt part of something that had finally learned how to heal. The future had arrived, not as a product launch, but as a parade of light. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones still holding the light we dropped. Noah wasn't a genius rediscovered. He was the reminder that genius never belonged to titles in the first place. That integrity doesn't retire when the world stops rewarding it. That there are people, quiet, unseen, persistent, who keep rebuilding what others break because they can't stand to see good things die. And Evelyn. She learned that leadership isn't about staying ahead of others. It's about standing beside them. About realizing that saving a company means nothing if you lose its soul in the process. Together, they didn't rebuild Novatech to chase profit. They rebuilt it to restore faith in work that heals, in truth that survives the storm, in humanity that can still outgrow its greed. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, silenced by people who mistook humility for weakness, remember this story. Remember that the world's progress often begins in quiet hands in humble rooms. The janitor who refused to quit became the man who rebuilt lives. The CEO who chased control learned to share it. And a company once built for shareholders became a sanctuary for purpose. So maybe the lesson isn't about business at all. Maybe it's about the quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but earns respect. Because dignity can't be stolen, and truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds a way back to the surface. Now I'll turn the question to you. What truth did this story remind you of? And where in the world are you listening from tonight? Maybe you've seen someone like Noah, someone whose worth went unnoticed until the moment everything depended on them. Or maybe you are that person, still building, still believing that kindness can exist in places ambition once ruled. If you believe that dignity can outlast power, then you're already part of this story. Because this isn't just the story of a company reborn. It's the story of what happens when ordinary people remember what extraordinary really means. Thank you for listening.